All right, I would like to talk to you guys about fragments and run-ons. And I want to say, as we are looking at this, that this is probably something that you've talked about before in another English or language arts class. Maybe you've talked about it before with me. If that's the case, I want you to know that I'm aware of that. I'm okay with that. Review doesn't hurt. It's actually very helpful, especially with really foundational skills like these. So a little bit of what this is might be a review, but my guess would be that you will hear something new or you'll hear something old presented in a new way. So let's go ahead and get started. First off, I want to start with some definitions, some ground rules for what a sentence needs. First, a sentence needs one subject and one predicate. A subject of a sentence, and we've talked about this, a subject of a sentence is who or what is doing something or is existing. It's a noun or a pronoun. It's the doer of the sentence. And then the predicate, everything else, is describing what the subject is doing or how the subject is existing. It includes a verb, but it can also include other words like adverbs or objects or other things. And every sentence needs both of those. A sentence also has to express a complete thought. And what I mean by that is a sentence has to make sense by itself. It can't depend on another sentence to finish its thought. It has to start and finish a thought by itself. And I'll show you an example of when a sentence fails to do that a little bit later. But for now, these are the three things that I want you to have in mind that a sentence needs: a complete subject, complete subject, a complete predicate, and a complete thought. It is possible that a sentence will have a compound subject or a compound predicate. I'll talk about this, but a compound subject is still one subject. It just has two people or things doing the action. And same with a predicate. It's still considered one predicate. There are two actions that are happening. So the errors that we're going to focus on correcting are fragments and run-ons. A fragment is when a sentence is missing one of those three essential elements. It's either missing a subject, a predicate, or a complete thought. A run-on is when a sentence has too much of one of those things. Usually a run-on will have two subjects and two predicates in one sentence, and that's too many. So let's look at some examples. Here's a complete sentence. I stopped at the store on my way home from work. So think about it for a second. Identify the subject of the sentence. What is the person or thing doing the action? The subject here is I. I is the one doing the action. So then the predicate is everything else. Stopped at the store on my way home from work. Stopped is the verb, but the predicate is more than just the verb. The predicate is everything else. Let's look at another example. The strange little man would not stop looking at me. Identify the subject. And hopefully you said the strange little man as the subject. Man specifically is the one doing the action, but the adjectives, the strange little, are also part of that. So the strange little man is together, that's the subject, which means the predicate would not stop looking at me. Hopefully that's never happened to you. Here's another one. John and Rachel love to go hiking on the weekends. Take a second, identify the subject. Try to see if you can spot what the subject is here. Hopefully you said John and Rachel. John and Rachel is the subject, and it is a compound subject. So this is what I was describing earlier when I said that a sentence can have a compound subject. It's compound because there's more than one person or thing doing the action here. John and Rachel together are the subject. This isn't two subjects. This is one subject because it's all contained right there with the word and. it's connected with the word and. It's all contained, so it's one subject. And then our predicate, the action that John and Rachel are doing, is love to go hiking on the weekends. Here's one more sentence. Eric and Diana went a trip to Montana and got to stay at the Marlboro Ranch. So think about the subject here. Who or what is the subject? Should be Eric and Diana. Eric and Diana, again, this is compound. It's one subject with two people. Two people. So then the predicate, what is the predicate here? Well, it's everything else. Won a trip to Montana and got to stay at the Marlboro Ranch. So this is actually also an example of a compound predicate, because the predicate has two verbs. And let me draw here. We have one verb of won, and we have another verb of got, which, believe it or not, got is a verb. So we have two verbs, and that makes it a compound predicate. It's still just one predicate because it's all there together. It's all connected with the word and. I just did a pretty poor job of circling that, but you get the idea. So it's still a compound predicate. Here's another sentence. Arrived late to his first class. So tell me what's going on here. This is a fragment. It's missing something. We have an action, arrived late to his first class. We have basically a predicate with no subject. And obviously when I say it out loud, it sounds incomplete. Arrived late to his first class. We don't know who or what is arriving late to his first class. It could be Tom. It could be a dog at obedience class. It could be, who knows? We need that subject. And without that subject, this is a fragment. One more. The boy on his first day of school. So this is, again, this is a fragment. We have a subject, the boy. We have, it seems like maybe part of a predicate on his first day of school, but we don't really have a verb here. We don't have an action that the boy is doing. So even though we could say that it has a predicate, it's not a complete predicate because it doesn't have a verb. It doesn't have an action that's being done. So this is, again, this is a fragment. I went to the store and bought my wife some flowers. What do you think about this one? Is it a fragment? Is it a run-on? Or is it fine? Think about it. Our subject is I. I am the one doing the action. And our, oops, let me draw the rest of our box. That's my mistake. The rest of our sentence, went to the store and bought my wife some flowers. That is just one predicate. So even though this is a long sentence, it's not a run-on. Went to the store and bought my wife some flowers. There are two actions here, went and bought, but they're joined by and it's considered just one compound predicate. So this is a complete sentence. I don't need to do anything to correct it. But look at this. I went to the store and I bought my wife some flowers. So very, very similar sentence. I've just inserted one more subject. So now it has two subjects. And it's not a compound subject because they're not together. It's I over here and then I over here. And they're separated by lots of words, including a predicate. The two subjects are separated by a predicate, and there are actually two predicates. So as it stands now, this sentence, I went to the store and I bought my wife some flowers, is a run-on. So in inserting that extra I, that second I, is what made it a run-on, because now it has two subjects and it has two predicates. So what do we do? What do we do when we have a run-on like this? And I'm going to give you some strategies, some strategies to correct this. You might already see some simple things that you can do to fix it, but I'm going to go through 4 ways to fix a run-on. And then we'll go back and we'll practice with that sentence we were just looking at. Number 1, separate with a period. Just make it into 2 sentences. I have one subject and predicate over here. I have one subject and predicate over here. Just break them apart. That works. You can also separate with a semicolon when the sentences are closely related. They have to be closely related. The way that they interact with each other, the 2 ideas of the 2 sentences, it has to be so obvious that we don't need anything else. And then we can use a semicolon to join them. So it's not quite as strong as a period. It doesn't quite break it into 2 complete sentences, but it's still very strong punctuation. And then a little bit weaker punctuation is a comma. So I can create a compound sentence using a conjunction, or I can use a conjunctive adverb. If I use a conjunction, especially a coordinated conjunction like and, or, but, so, yet, I can use a comma, and that's enough to join the sentences together. Or I can use a conjunctive adverb. That's something that we will talk about later. If you feel brave, create a complex sentence using a subordinated conjunction, and that is something else we'll talk about later. For now, I want to focus on just the first kind of 3.5 points there. Separating with a period, separating with a semicolon, separating with a conjunction, specifically a coordinating conjunction. So let's go back to that last example. I went to the store and I bought my wife some flowers. So the first thing we can do is we can create this, we can create 2 complete sentences. I'm going to insert a period after my first predicate. I went to the store, period. And then I'm going to get rid of my conjunction. I'm going to get rid of and. I went to the store, period. I bought my wife some flowers. When we create 2 sentences that way, it's going to sound very choppy. I went to the store. I bought my wife some flowers. Sometimes that's appropriate if I'm trying to be very emphatic in my speaking. I want to speak in short, choppy sentences. That's not usually the case. So let's try something else here. The second strategy, if you remember, was a semicolon. A semicolon looks like a comma, like this, and then it has another dot above the comma. That's a semicolon, in case you aren't familiar with that. So I'm going to put the semicolon in the same place that I put my period. I'm going to put it right after store, right at the end of the first predicate. With a semicolon, no conjunction is used, just like with a period. So I'm going to scratch out and this is going to read really similar to how we just did it with a period. I went to the store, I bought my wife some flowers. It's not as hard of a break between the 2, but it's still a pretty clean break. Now, I want to point out that with a period, usually I would have to capitalize the first letter of my second sentence. In this case, I is already capitalized. With a semicolon, you don't capitalize. It's not creating 2 complete sentences. It's just joining 2 sentences. So I'm only going to capitalize the very, very first letter. I'm not going to capitalize the first letter of the second sentence or second clause. So that's using a semicolon. And then the other strategy that we talked about is a comma with a coordinating conjunction. In this case, and is a coordinating conjunction. So if I put a comma, I'm going to put it in the same place. Notice that all of the punctuation has gone in the same place after the first predicate, after the end of the first sentence. So I'm going to put my comma there, and then that's all I need to do. No capitalization, no separation. I don't need to add anything. I don't need to take anything out. Comma, and. I went to the store, comma, and I bought my wife some flowers. And when we use conjunctions, it flows a little bit better, and the relationship between the 2 ideas is a little bit more obvious. I could say I went to the store, so I bought my wife some flowers. Like, while I was there, I decided to buy her some flowers. I could say I went to the store, but I bought my wife some flowers. Like, I went to the store, maybe I'm not supposed to go to the store, but I bought her some flowers, so she can't be that mad. Or I could use and, like I have here. I went to the store and I bought my wife some flowers, and that shows that they're more naturally related events. So we talked about 4 ways to fix run-ons. Separate with a period, separate with a comma, create a compound sentence using a conjunction and a comma, or you can use a conjunctive adverb. And I want to point out that when I created number 3, I followed the rule. I used a comma right there, and then I used a coordinating conjunction or. So that rule is actually an example of the rule. I'm so clever. Let me erase that. At this point, you might be wondering, well, okay, those are 4 ways to fix a run-on. How about 4 ways to fix a fragment? Well, here's the thing. There's only one way to fix a fragment, and that's to add what is missing. If it's missing a subject, add a subject. If it's missing a predicate, add a predicate. If it doesn't make sense by itself, that's a little bit more complicated. And we'll talk about that in a future class. But most of the time it's going to be missing a subject or a predicate, and all you need to do is add one of those things. So that's where I'm going to stop this video for now. I'm going to create a second video working through a few more examples of fragments and run-ons.